Howdy folks, hope you all had a great weekend and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. As you can no doubt tell, I am joined once again on the couch by Eddie, specifically for the beginning of this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles, because this is once again sponsored by NordPass. I'm sure you all are familiar with the deal by now. Head over to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get yourself a 2-year NordPass premium plan with a month for free, all covered by NordPass's 30-day no questions asked money back guarantee. And the reason Eddie is here is because we know somebody who's taken advantage of this deal.
We do. I'm about to read a Facebook post from my mum that she posted just this week. Ian and I, Ian being my dad, have just spent most of the afternoon setting up new laptops. It would be really helpful if a certain person could remember his passwords.
Your dad.
My mum later goes on to say, I have NordPass for just this. The dinosaur in the family, however, doesn't. To which my auntie replies, isn't that what children are for?
Yeah, setting up your new laptops, yeah.
So I responded to that saying, the reason my mum has NordPass is because I put her onto it.
Yes.
The reason I put her onto it is because you put me onto it.
That's all right. And she is very, very pleased with it, isn't she?
She absolutely is.
And your dad wishes he had it now, doesn't he?
Yes, he had 4 passwords to remember and can't do that. He might have been able to remember 1.
Your dad is great. He is, by the way, best dad ever. But he's an idiot.
But yeah. When he's technologically inferior,
he's just no good.
I love him to bits.
You want him to dismantle a wardrobe and then help you take it upstairs through the doorway that it wouldn't fit and then reassemble it? He's the man. But don't ask him to set up a new laptop. Not without the help of NordPass. And you too, of course, can take advantage of this offer by heading over to nordpass.com/jingles and using code JINGLES to get yourself a 2-year NordPass premium plan plus a month for free, all covered by Nord's 30-day no questions asked money back guarantee. This week's episode sponsored by Eddie's mum.
Thanks, Mum.
So, I suppose the big news, if you saw yesterday's surprise Sunday bonus video, is Diablo IV. I mean, it's still a couple of months away from release, but the beta test is up. Now, you could pay to get into it, or, if you were me, you could wait for one of your contacts at Blizzard to provide you with a code. And I was actually in the closed alpha, by the way. And it has come on a long way since the closed alpha. I mean, most of what was there is still here. It's just been polished. You know, they now actually have proper cutscenes and full voice acting, and there's not placeholder text plastered over everything, which is just as it should be, because if people have been paying to get into this test and there was still placeholder text on 80% of everything, they probably wouldn't have been too happy, which is only right. It's very much, rather than just repeat everything that I said in yesterday's Surprise Sunday bonus Diablo video, is it any good? Short answer, yes. Long answer, considerably longer than that. But it is Diablo. It's got the same gameplay loop that you love from all of the previous Diablo games. Diablo 2 purists probably won't like it in the same way that they didn't like Diablo 3. But if you're not a Diablo 2 hipster and you liked Diablo 2 and you liked Diablo 3 as well, you're going to like Diablo 4. It's got exactly the Diablo-style gameplay loop that keeps everybody coming back. And they've kind of streamlined it. And when I say that, I mean they've sanded off some of the rough edges. Some of the pain in the arse things about the previous Diablo games are no longer a pain in the arse in Diablo 4. For example, in Diablo 2, your bags were constantly getting cluttered up. I mean, there's still limited inventory space, but in Diablo 2, your bags would be full not just of the useful stuff that you might want to sell or equip, but also things that you kind of needed, but which didn't directly affect your character. Things like Scrolls of Town Portal, Scrolls of Identify, so that you can actually see what an item was and decide whether or not you wanted to use it or sell it. And then in Diablo 3, they made things a bit better by giving you books, tomes of Town Portal and tomes of Identify, where they took up exactly the same amount of space as a single scroll, but you could put 10 scrolls into them. So inventory management made things a bit easier. In Diablo 4, they've done away with the scrolls entirely. You can just teleport to any waypoint that you've unlocked directly from the map, wherever you are at any given time, and you don't need to identify anything, so there are no scrolls of Identify. Things like that. scattered throughout the whole game, where they've just sanded off all of those rough edges to make things a bit more accessible and less of a pain in the arse. There are some new systems in the game as well, where they've kind of expanded on, well, in many cases they've just expanded on systems that already existed in the previous games, and in some cases they've introduced completely new things. If you want the full skinny on what's changed and what's good and what isn't, then check out yesterday's video. I'm not going to repeat myself in this episode of Mingles with Jingles. That's what yesterday's Diablo video was for. But one thing that they didn't do, and this is something that Blizzard never does, and I'm not just talking about a beta test weekend, anytime they release a new game, anytime they release an expansion for an existing game, they know exactly what kind of server load they can anticipate on launch day, because they know exactly how many people have installed and pre-purchased and are going to want to be playing, and they never put enough login or authentication servers on to handle the stress. Which I suppose is only to be expected. They are a small indie developer after all. I mean, you know, they're not made of money. They're only worth $62 billion. All of those login and authentication servers cost money. But yeah, the login experience for the Diablo IV test was exactly the same as the login experience for every other launch of a new Blizzard game or an expansion for an existing Blizzard game. It was absolutely horrific, because they never lay on enough servers to handle the load that they know they're going to get from the number of people that they know are going to be trying to play. In my case, the first time I tried to get into the game, I was greeted by a login screen that informed me I was going to have to wait 31 minutes in a queue. And the thing about that estimated time until you can start playing thing is it is never accurate either. Now, in my case, I kind of lucked out, because it told me, yeah, you're going to have to wait 31 minutes, but in actual fact, I only had to wait about 15. Whether or not that was because other people were just getting kicked out of the queue for no apparently good reason as the servers crumbled under the strain, or people were just quitting and thinking, screw this, life's too short. So I ended up jumping the queue a bit, but it only took me 15 minutes. For other people, it's been taking substantially longer than advertised. Be warned, that queue countdown timer is not 100% accurate. It's not even 50% accurate, and your actual wait time may be a lot longer than indicated. Blizzard said, please note that the countdown may finish and go beyond the duration listed on the queue timer. Do not leave the queue, as this will restart the queue. Well, you know, small independent developer. They're only worth $62 billion. All those extra authentication and login servers cost money, you know. I heard over the weekend that Blizzard hadn't actually put on any dedicated authentication or login servers, and instead the entire beta test was actually just being run from a couple of developers' workstations. And, while I suspect that probably was a bit of an exaggeration, I also wouldn't be surprised if it was true. It's exactly the kind of cheap-ass thing that you'd expect of Blizzard, and it would explain why Blizzard's game launches are always such unmitigated disasters. Speaking of which, remember this was the closed beta test weekend, so limited access. Next weekend is the open beta test weekend. And remember, Blizzard know exactly how many people they can expect to be trying to play. They always do. They know exactly how many copies of whichever game have been sold. They know exactly how many copies have been installed via the Blizzard launcher. The number of people trying to get in should never be coming as a surprise to them, and yet they never lay on enough servers to handle the strain. And it's the open test weekend coming up, where, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe 4 times as many people are going to be trying to get in. I cannot see the situation getting any better next weekend. If anything, it's likely to be exponentially worse. So, how are Blizzard planning on handling this? Are they laying on new servers to help spread the workload around? No, of course not. But that doesn't mean they're not doing anything. So what are they doing, Jingles? Apparently they're fixing the queue timers. That's right, you're going to be in the queue for longer, but at least you'll have an accurate representation of how long you can expect to be in the queue for. Next weekend, when it says you're going to be in the queue for an hour and a half, you will actually be in the queue for an hour and a half. Well, up to an hour and a half, or until you lose the will to live, whichever comes first. It is a good game, though. And honestly, I needed the distraction because this has not been a good weekend. So some of you will probably already be aware of this one. But Rita's cat Crystalline died on Friday. She'd been struggling with kidney disease for quite some time now. And that shit is expensive. I don't know exactly what Rita's vet bills have been, but in the struggle to try to give her some kind of quality of life since she was diagnosed with kidney disease, the tests and the treatment, Rita probably doesn't have an awful lot of change out of £6,000. The unfortunate thing about kidney disease in a cat is it never gets any better. The very best you can hope for is that it doesn't get any worse. Well, it got worse. I'll spare you the details, but early on Friday afternoon, Crystalline died. You might remember I lost our dog Boo a couple of years ago, and that was absolutely horrible. And while Crystalline wasn't my cat, she was Rita's cat, I basically lived in the same house as this cat for the best part of the last 7 years. I'd known that little cat since she was only 5 years old, and she died at the age of 13. So it was horrible for me. But as bad as it was for me, you can't even begin to imagine how bad it was for Rita. Just to give you some sense of perspective here, since Rita left home and set out for herself, her entire adult life she's had that cat, Crystalline, by her side. She's been the one constant thing in Rita's entire life as an adult that she's been able to rely on. And on Friday she died. Rita has been absolutely crushed by this. I mean, it hasn't been a walk in the park for me either, but Crystalline wasn't my cat. I mean, I loved her, but I didn't have the same relationship with her that Rita did. Because she was, how can I put this? You have to remember that when Rita adopted her as a kitten from a cat shelter, she'd been horribly mistreated. And for the first 5 years of her life, it was just her and Rita. And she was absolutely devoted to Rita. Rita was the only person in the world she trusted. And then for the last 7 years, mostly for the last 7 years, she'd been living with me. Or at least being in the same house as me. And she was so distrustful of anybody who wasn't Rita that it took 2 years before she started to tolerate and trust me. And aside from Rita, I was the only other person in the entire world that cat ever showed any affection to. You had to work hard to earn that cat's trust. But, once you'd earned it, she was your friend for life. Unfortunately, her life ended on Friday. And like I said, it hasn't exactly been a walk in the park for me, but she wasn't my cat. I've got 2 cats of my own that I love. And they're not getting any younger either. But for Rita, oh man, no, just horrible. Absolutely horrible. And if you've lost any pets of your own, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It never gets easier. People say, yeah, just give it time and it won't hurt as much. Nope, bullshit. It never stops hurting. It just doesn't hurt as often. You're not constantly being reminded of their existence. After enough time's passed, eventually entire weeks will go by before you see something that reminds you of them and you're reduced to a sobbing wreck. It's just, it never hurts any less. It just doesn't hurt as often. Rita, of course, is nowhere near that stage just yet. It has been a horrible weekend. But it will get better. Well, anyway, spot of good news. So, who remembers Borderlands 2? Yeah, I know Borderlands 3 came out a couple of years ago. Actually, it's been more than just a couple of years. It feels like it was just yesterday, but it came out at the same time as Red Dead Redemption 2. And then, of course, standalone game Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. And it's about Tiny Tina that this next bit of news concerns. Actually, side note here. The character Tiny Tina, who was fantastic, by the way, and for many people, the single best character, yes, even better than Claptrap, in Borderlands 2. The voice actor that did Tiny Tina is the incredibly talented Ashley Burke. You might have seen Ashley on YouTube. She still has the YouTube channel, but I don't think it's been updated in years. That was quite popular about 10 years ago. Hey Ash, what you playing? Where her and her brother, actually her whole family, They were all hilarious, would just mess around with games, and it was really funny stuff. But Tiny Tina isn't the only character she's done. I found out a while back, and it took me by surprise, that she not only does the voice and character of Tiny Tina in Borderlands, but she also does Aloy, the main character in Horizon Zero Dawn. Just think about that for a minute. That's like one day finding out that the guy that does the voices for Yoda and Gandalf are the same person. It couldn't be more different if you tried. But anyway, back to the subject. Tiny Tina. So, massively popular character from Borderlands 2. So popular that she's now, I think 8 years later, spawned her own spin-off, Tiny Tina's Wonderland. But this isn't the first Tiny Tina-centered expansion or spin-off or DLC that there has been for Borderlands. There was a sort of prototype version of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands that came out first and was released as a standalone expansion for Borderlands 2. Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, which in my opinion is infinitely superior, way funnier, and just all-round better than Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. And I kind of liked Tiny Tina Wonderlands, but Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep was a far superior experience. And it's now free on Steam. You can add it to your Steam library, and it's yours to keep forever. You don't even have to download and install it today. It's just there. It's yours for whenever you decide to play it. Although I do recommend that you do download and install it as soon as possible, because it's hilarious. I mean, you've got guns that shoot swords, right? Think about that for a minute. You have guns that shoot swords. I mean, I don't mean a gun that shoots at swords. I mean a gun that fires swords. How awesome is that? The game as a whole is just amazing. And even if you've never played Borderlands, even if you have no idea who Tiny Tina is, and you're not exactly invested in the whole experience, it's free. It's yours to keep forever. So, I mean, let's put it this way. There is no downside here. It's either going to be one of the greatest gaming experiences of your life, or it isn't. And it hasn't cost you anything to find out. Just the time that it took to download and install it. So you literally have nothing to lose here other than some hard drive space. And there's an excellent chance that if you're listening to this, you've probably got the same taste in games as me. And if you haven't played Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, and I'm recommending it to you, you're probably going to enjoy it too. Give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen? So, yeah. It's been a tough weekend, but at least I had Diablo IV to distract me. And while getting into Diablo IV was a bit of a pain in the arse, at least one I was in, the experience was relatively smooth. I mean, it wasn't perfect. It got a bit laggy whenever you got near other players, but it's not the full release. It's fine. You expect to encounter issues when you're playing in a beta test, and I didn't really encounter... I mean, there must have been some, aside from the lag in areas with lots of other players around. But other than that, I can't remember anything that went wrong. So at least it had a better launch than the latest update to Star Citizen. Which promised to be the biggest patch yet, introducing for the first time true persistence to the persistent universe, as well as a host of other long-awaited features. Or at least that was the theory. It was kind of hard to tell whether or not any of these things worked because nobody could get in. Well, that's not strictly true. Sometimes after queuing for a few hours and having to completely restart the client multiple times, people did actually get in, only to find that it was difficult to tell whether or not any of the new features worked because nothing else worked either. Let me have a look at some of the complaints. Oh, you couldn't make this shit up. Dozens of login attempts, Admiral Grogan wrote on the official forums, managed to get in once for 10 minutes and nothing could be interacted with. Terminals didn't work, ship controls, missions, nothing. And then a 30k crash. This is embarrassingly bad even by Star Citizen standards. And remember this, by the way, in case you haven't heard of him, is from one of Star Citizen's biggest fans. He also went on to say, I've been a backer since day one, I'm not going anywhere. Other people appear to have been way too, and this is probably not going to surprise anybody because we're talking about Star Citizen backers here, but other people have been way too quick to try to put a happy spin on it. People like Serera. Again, these aren't people that I've ever heard of, but they're apparently well known on the Star Citizen forums. Serera said, people are bitching about not being able to play the game, but pay zero attention to the fact that these bugs are here because Cloud Imperium Games pushed out a patch with so much content. And a lot of other people in the replies appeared to agree. Although none of them could be pinned down to state precisely exactly how much of this new content they'd actually experienced. As to whether or not they'd actually managed to log in and gotten anything to work, let alone the new content that they were also excited about. Oh well, never mind. I'm sure that Cloud Imperium Games... Actually, this patch was released on a Friday. Never release a big patch on a Friday, because when it inevitably goes wrong, that means all of the developers are in work over the weekend trying to unfuck everything that they fucked up the day before. And I'm sure, just like the developers of The Division 2, who last month introduced a patch so bad it literally broke everything, and they had to fix the system for patching the game before they could introduce a patch to fix the thing that had gone wrong with the game. But I'm sure Cloud Imperium Games are enjoying all kinds of unpaid overtime this weekend, unfucking whatever it was that they fucked up with the latest big patch for Star Citizen. And on that bombshell, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. Like I said, it hasn't been a fantastic weekend, at least not for me, but I have at least had some fun playing Diablo IV, and you can always have a laugh at Star Citizen's expense, so I'll try to leave things on a happy note. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, because that's it. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.